Hi everyone, good afternoon. I want to just greet you this afternoon, this very wet afternoon in London or in the UK. I hope you're all well. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jacqueline Brown and I am the Diaspora Experience Manager here at AFFORD. And it's really lovely to have you with us. This session that we're having today, we're doing it, as I said, live on a webinar. So I'd just like to, welcome you to join us here. We're going to be talking about African languages, raising that topic of the importance of African languages today, and in Africa, within the world, the usage of the different languages and what type of languages that there are. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to introduce, there's going to be 3 speakers today. It's a Q&A with them, but there will be opportunity for you all who are joining to also ask some questions, make some contributions at the end. I aim to keep you about 45 minutes, and then you can go and have the rest of your lunch or just have a little bit of a break. How about that? So welcome once again. And first of all, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Richard Leigh, who's here at AFFORD, one of the managers here at AFFORD. This is Richard here. In the middle, we have Ezra, and Ezra is the gentleman who will be speaking later about specifically about Swahili and the language school they have in Tanzania, which really can't wait to hear more about that. And then our colleague Paul, who is the Policy and Engagement Manager here at AFFORD, who has quite a wealth of experience with African languages and has been working with SOAS as well. But he'll be able to introduce himself. So if I could just invite Paul and Richard to start with, and just for us to discuss African languages in general. So again, if you have some questions, please hold them, or you can type them in the comment box and I can see them and I will get back to them later, I promise you. So Paul, African languages, what kind of languages are there? What types of language? How many do you know? Because there's probably more than we realize.
I think there's more than most people realize, and it's a matter of dispute amongst academics and linguists. There are at least 3,000 languages across Africa, probably more, but it depends how you define a language or a dialect or a subdialect. African languages fall within different language families. So we're going to be talking today about Kiswahili, for example, and Ezra can correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand Kiswahili is a Bantu language, so it's within the Bantu language family. Other African languages that I'm more familiar with, for example, include Amharic, which is in the Semitic language family. It's the language of Ethiopia, and its distant cousin Arabic, which is spoken throughout much of North Africa and also the Horn of Africa. Am I correct, Ezra, to say that Swahili is a Bantu language?
I've just unmuted myself.
Yeah, that's also disputed, Paul. There are those who say that that there's a great deal of influence from Bantu. Yes. Bantu-speaking peoples, but then there's also a fairly strong Arabic influence in Swahili. So, there are those who say it's actually more neutral than just purely Bantu.
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Bantu, except that they are very attracted. They have a great affinity for Kiswahili.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. So we'll go in this dispute then, or debate, I guess, on that topic. But that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Ezra. So with all these languages, I mean, you haven't even probably touched the iceberg, tip of the iceberg yet with the languages, 3,000-ish languages or dialects. Why is it so important today? Like, how have you seen in your work, Paul, with policy and engagement here at AFFORD, or just in your own life, how important have you seen it today and the growth of African languages?
Okay, I'll try and answer that question as best I can, and I'm sure Ezra and Richard will have their own experiences and views on this question. For me, learning to speak a language is really important for getting to learn about the people and the culture in a particular place, and it can help you understand better the context. So whether you're doing business, whether you're doing diplomacy, whether you're just traveling on holiday, it greatly enriches your experience of being in a country if you're able to engage with local people. And in terms of the importance of African languages, well, I would draw everyone's attention to the fact that it's estimated that by 2050, half of the world's population will be African. So in terms of future business, future trade, future career opportunities, also future tourism, Africa is going to be increasingly important. And as we often say at AFFORD, Africa is not a country. It's 54 states who are kind of African Union member states. We've already said it's thousands of sort of languages. However, there are a few big languages within Africa that serve as what we call lingua francas. So they serve to connect people across different kind of countries and regions.
Okay, and Richard, what about yourself within your work at AFFORD? Because you do travel a lot for business, and then you're Ghanaian. So even if you're back home in Ghana, what kind of experiences have you had, or how has language been important for you?
Well, I think the importance and essence of language, as Paul and Ezra have said, cannot be underestimated or overlooked. In my case, for instance, there are issues where you've gone somewhere, and because in the case of Ghana, it's the official language is English, you are tempted in any business, anything you do, to go straight into English, because the assumption is people would then be able to speak that with you, understand you. But I've had people who are trying to build schools in Ghana, and part of their experience is that when the teachers start, because when the children are learning the language and you ask them questions in English, it takes a while for them to respond because they're having to process a lot. But as soon as you switch to the local dialect, which they easily understand, they give you the answer in just a few seconds. So it's always been about how you translate that. And in the case of Ghana, I think a lot of the West African countries, there's been a lot of advocacy on using the local languages as the official language, and in so many examples. But say in the case of Philippines, they use their local dialect, Tagalog, as well as Spanish and English, even in the universities. So when people leave the universities in terms of writing, speaking, and reading, all the 2-3 languages, they are already mastering it before they start. So when they encounter those situations, and we have to also not run away from the fact that there's quite a huge, sizable number of Africans who are not literate. So there's the option where people are having to use certain local dialects to get around and do business, whether it's on the small scale side, you travel to some parts of the country they've never really been to school, but they are doing good business work, whether it's carpentry, it's fishing, they do the real supply before the big ones can take it and start to make, and it's that reason why we can't underestimate the importance of that. And I think in our work, whenever we get to some situations, you get people having to, so at our last event in Ghana, for instance, one of our speakers is naturally Francophone and speaks English. So she's able to speak the English, but in her presentation gets to a point where she naturally just switches into French before she realizes that, okay, it's supposed to be English, but just because of presentation and time, and she's trying to make the time, when there's that difficulty of a particular word or phrase, the automatic thing is to switch to the language that they easily flow in and speak it. And then someone in the crowd then says it out in English, then they say, yes, that's what I'm trying to say, and then switches back. So there's that instances where you get to see all of these things play out in a way that, and it kind of dawns on, in the case of Ghana, we are totally surrounded by Francophone speaking countries. So if you have to move and it's not by plane and you're going to the first neighboring country or even traveling through them, at the port, you have to a little bit of French just to get around. And so that's why I think it's important, and the very little bit is very important. And it's not, I think like Paul said, it's more about the spoken one and understanding it more than even the written aspect of it. And yeah.
That's interesting. You raised a couple of points. One was about slipping back into the language you're most familiar with, or you grew with, I guess, and just recognizing even I am finding with a lot of my African friends is that, you know, they're celebrating their home language, even if they weren't born in Africa. It's a language from their parents. They're now speaking it or choosing to speak whatever their mother's tongue is. And even I've seen with BBC Africa and BBC where the pidgin language now is being spoken is recognised on a channel with the BBC. Seems to be an importance for, especially for the West African usage of the pidgin as well. But yes, just being able to use your own language seems to be quite important to be able to connect, and that's what you guys are saying. So now with these languages, where can you see, if you're here in the UK or in Europe or in the US, where can you see the importance of, where could you utilize these languages? In what instances do you think you can utilize African languages? That's Paul, Richard, or even Ezra, if you want to jump in.
I'll just say briefly, from my point of view, I've been a few of my previous roles had a lot of the people from the young children from African or Caribbean descent, and when in the past they weren't really serious about the so-called local dialect or mother tongue, and then all of a sudden there's a huge craze now for them to start to speak, and I hear them blame their parents that they never took it serious to teach us that language. And then they go to school and one or two of their friends are able to speak, and then it suddenly makes that friend cool because they can speak that language and they can. So there's that craze now. They're going for every app that can help them to study or speak any of the African dialects. And for most of them, when they go on holidays, they want to at least understand what people are saying, because people can easily tell you are not brought up here, and so you want to really feel like you're part of those people, and there's that kind of helps the same. But I think one of the major things for us is to start to have things written in the local dialects or in the African languages. So maybe for Swahili, it's a lot easier because it's spoken a lot more or it's taught a lot more. And I think it doesn't really matter even if it's just one region of a country. If they have to, they need to. In the case of Ghana, you have the area in which you start studying. There's a part of Ghanaian language that is used and is taught. Even though it's not the main language, you get to study one Ghanaian language based on the area that your school is, just to give you that understanding, and you learn to read, write it, and all the things that come with it, the culture. So I think we need to just start to give people that option. And the statistics that Paul mentioned earlier, with more than 50% of the world population having to become African, if for business, for companies, for anything at all, if you have to source people from the continent as your labor, as anything human resource, then you need to really understand them. And it then means that we have to start to think about doing more things in those languages. For most of the work, sometimes AFFORD or our partners do, even if we do it in English, we're thinking of how do we translate it into French, because we think that there's that market as well that we want to reach out to. So we have to start to look at those options just to make sure that some of these things are available in those languages.
Yeah, I mean, even, I was reading, was it in Kenya or in Nigeria that they want to teach in African countries languages like Mandarin because of the influx of the Chinese. We now see the Russians coming into the continent, so will their language now become key for Africans to learn? But then the other way around, for businesses who want to go into these African countries to learn these languages in order to do better business. But with that saying, we're always talking about languages like Yoruba, like Kiswahili or Swahili, like Tree, like there's so many. Amharic, whatever we're saying, the typical ones that we all know about. But then Paul was having a discussion about languages spoken in Africa that may not be seen as, maybe not original languages, but they're still spoken in Africa and they're part of that discussion. Would you like to make your point about that?
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. And I was just picking up on something that Richard said as well. People learn African languages for different reasons and different motivations. Some of that can be linked to wanting to build or rebuild their relationship with the continent. It might be with their country of origin or heritage. But we also had a discussion just before we started the session today about whether we should also include European languages such as English, French, Portuguese or Spanish that are also African languages, just by virtue of the fact there are so many speakers within Africa. And speaking from my own experience, although I learned French at school, I think it's fair to say language teaching in the UK is very poor, especially when it comes to spoken and oral comprehension. And it was only when I was in Africa that I learned to speak French. And picking up on something else that Richard said earlier, how you ask a question of somebody, and in particular what language you ask that question in, determines in part the answer you get. Language can act as a filter. So, and I've had this experience in Ethiopia and in Egypt. If I ask a question in English of, let's say, working professionals that I'm doing things with, I'll get a different quality of answer than if I ask the same question in Arabic or in Amharic. So yeah, I don't know whether, Ezra, you've got any views on this question of the Africanness of European languages.
Yeah, let me just comment there and say that I think one of the realities is that these, the trade patterns that were set up basically related between a country and its colonizing and its colonizers, right? So certain languages entrenched themselves purely because of that relationship. Portuguese is spoken in Mozambique and Angola. English, of course, is dominant in Eastern Africa and part of Central Africa, and then French, the Francophone countries, and even the trade patterns. And actually, that's what, besides agreeing that they are seen as African languages, and in fact, the reality is there are three European languages that are official African Union languages as well. But in addition to that, there is Swahili and Arabic, which are also African Union official languages, right? And for me, it reinforces the reality that language, the greatest value, the greatest importance of a language is communication. It basically enables communication between people. And they actually do have other value as well. There's the value of integration. If you take a country like Tanzania, which has 53 languages, 53 language groups, the founding president of Tanzania, I think, was very foresighted in establishing Swahili as the national language. And so Swahili is spoken perfectly in Tanzania. And nobody questions, nobody feels like it was been foisted on them because it was a neutral language that they adopted. The same happened in Kenya. There was an attempt to do a similar thing in Uganda, although it didn't go very far. But a language like Swahili, I think, has gradually become accepted across the continent, in the African Union and all, because of its growth. It's grown fairly rapidly. And to go back to your statistic, Paul, the fact that Africa has now adopted a common market. This is something that was just established a week or two ago. Again, emphasizes the value of having one common language that every African can speak. It's going to make a big difference, and it'll actually begin to dent the dominance of some of the other languages. Right now, the biggest dominant languages are, I'd say, Mandarin. Of course, I think Jacqueline already made a reference to that, Mandarin. There's Hindi as well, because India, with 1.2 billion people, is a big language too. Then we have English, which has a lot of non-native speakers, and Portuguese and Spanish, which are next. Swahili right now is spoken by, I think, close to I think it's about 500 million. But the idea is, if Africa is growing as rapidly as it is, if indeed, like Paul said, 1 in every 4 people is going to be African in 2050, then it makes sense for Swahili to just begin to not establish its dominance, but those who are smart to adopt Swahili sooner rather than later, because it's a reality that's coming their way. Anyway, I've spoken too much.
No, not at all. We've really enjoyed hearing your contribution, Ezra. Just to clarify, I think the statistic is that 1 in 2 people worldwide will be African by 2050, not 1 in 4, actually, which increases.
Yeah, well, we may need to check that. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's still a lot, a quarter or half.
As Ezra will be able to explain, one of the joys of Kiswahili in particular is that it's spoken by a large number of people within Africa, but also over a huge geographical area. And that's sort of one of the other advantages of learning African languages. It enables you to communicate with people in more than just one country. So I'm sure Ezra will be able to tell us all how many countries in which Kiswahili is spoken. But in my own experience, I've used Arabic from Morocco to Egypt to the Horn of Africa to communicate to people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and indeed with it here within the UK and Europe. It's been useful for me working with different communities. For example, the Somali community, many of them are Arabic speakers, and they feel more comfortable speaking in Arabic than they do in English.
Yeah, absolutely. Ezra, did you want to mention about, well, since we're moving swiftly into this, I think it may be a good opportunity to talk about the work that you're doing in a Swahili spoken country, which is not actually your home country, but let's tell us about your story.
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say that Swahili is actually fairly widely spoken, and the reason it acquired the status of an official language at the UN, at the AU rather, the African Union, was because it was being adopted by several countries. I mean, as it is right now, Swahili is spoken widely in East Africa, and that's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. But it also goes beyond to the Congo. They're speaking it. Swahili has been a really useful language for the peace building efforts that have been made. It's been a trading language, and I think it also has the distinct sort of uniqueness of having been the language for the liberation movement. If you talk to those who were involved in the liberation movement in Mozambique, in Angola to a certain extent, in Namibia, and in South Africa, a lot of them speak Swahili. In fact, the moment Swahili was adopted as one of the continental languages, I remember Joaquim Chissano, who was the then president of Mozambique, pulling up a stunt that had everybody totally stupefied, because he got up to make his closing address and just spoke in Swahili. And nobody was ready to sort of receive a speech in Swahili. They didn't even have the interpreters. But it's fairly widely spoken in the whole of Southern Africa and East Africa. So we have, I'd say, a population in the region of between 300 and 400 million already, who you can say are adopters of Kiswahili. Now, let me talk a bit about TCDC. This is MS Training Center for Development Cooperation, which is where I work, and where Swahili teaching is one of our key activities. The Training Center for Development Cooperation was started up actually by the Danes, the Danish government, as far back as 1967, when the Danes decided. Yeah. Did you mute me and then you unmute me? Okay. Yeah, the Danes decided that the development cooperation was best served by first teaching their volunteers. They were going to send a whole lot of volunteers to local situations, local villages in Tanzania. And they decided in order to enable their volunteers to communicate with the communities, they needed to teach them Swahili. So they set up a center where the volunteers would be landing posts for the volunteers. They'd come here, they'd learn Swahili, basic Swahili, and be given some cultural orientation, you know, the do's and don'ts of working with communities. And then they'd be sent off to community settings. Now, that turned out a fairly successful enterprise to begin with. And in the first few years, they had taught the language to enough volunteers to get out there. And then they began to teach volunteers who are being sent to other countries. I mean, there was some use of Swahili in Malawi. There was some use of Swahili in Kenya and in Uganda as well. And then it grew into teaching other skills other than Kiswahili. But Kiswahili has been the key, you know, the key area of, say, transfer between those who come here. Like I say, it started with volunteers. And then over time, as the skills were gained for teaching this language, other interested parties began to take an interest in coming to learn Swahili. And what we've done is refined our teaching methods and everything else to the point where now we are a Swahili teaching institution. We have other courses, of course, other academic programs that we offer. But we provide Swahili instruction to even students from study abroad programs from Europe and the US. And so, you know, we have a fairly extensive program. And, you know, it's in three levels. There's a basic level, which is usually a 3-week program. There's an intermediate level, and then there's an advanced program. So we even have some teaching of Swahili to those who come from, you know, I might even say security agencies who want to have their people learn Swahili. But that's just one, you know, I guess I cite that one because it, for me, seemed a little unusual. But yeah, the amazing thing, what I found really impressive is that there are students who come here and go through the basic program, and in the 3 weeks they spend here, go away actually able to comprehend and communicate in Kiswahili. And that, you know, so in terms of even marking, in terms of, you know, seeing what the impact is, one is able to do that because, you know, you get a person who comes in who does not know anything about Swahili and who then walks away having told a little story in Swahili.
Wow.
So that's what the TCDC is, a Training Center for Development Cooperation. That's what we try and do. We've made a lot of friends and continue to broaden our reach to others. Now, Swahili is being adopted in many other countries. South Africa announced last year that they're going to have Kiswahili taught in all their schools, in their high schools. Zimbabwe has also adopted Kiswahili. And I think there's a few other countries that are on the cusp of actually doing the same. So we see it having the potential to grow fairly rapidly. And like I said, by about between 2030 and 2050, Swahili will be one of the dominant languages on the planet. I have no doubt about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're saying the kind of people as well who are coming, I want to learn. Funnily enough, when I was living in Germany, which is a whole other story, I was having my Kenyan friends trying to teach me Swahili. And my times going to Kenya, I can just pole, that's it, and I'll move on. But it's all sorts of people who would have an interest in it. I mean, you said you have the universities, it's from the US, so the Americans and businesses, security business, you said, and you know the growth that you're predicting as well, and you say it will be a dominant language. You're very confident about that. So it seems like there is an importance. It's not just learning a language which is spoken in one country. This is a language spoken in multiple countries in a continent where there's going to be huge growth over the next, 30 years, 20, 30 years. So there is an importance for those who want to grow in business or within careers, within professional skills, to adopt a skill in Kiswahili as well. So the language school is open right now. How often are the programs? And tell us a bit about the surroundings within Arusha as well.
Well, TCDC is situated about 20 kilometers out of Arusha town itself. We sit on a campus, a small, very well built up campus that's, like I say, 20 kilometers away in an area called Usa River. We're built on 13 hectares of land. So we've got both accommodation and training facilities and rooms and all of that. And like I say, some of those, a lot of those universities who come for their study abroad programs will usually come and want to be, to be facilitated, not just in the language training, but also what we provide is an immersive course, so that the students actually go and live with members of the community, with actual community settings, and that way they are immersed in Kiswahili all the time that they're here. And I think that does help in the learning, because when you go to live with a family where Swahili is the dominant language, forget trying to speak to them in English, and people get to learn quite quickly. Arusha, as you know, is also you might say the capital of East Africa, because the East African community has its secretariat in Arusha. So it has, and it was also the venue of the Rwanda Tribunal. It has a lot of other historic, elements that mark it out in contrast with other towns in East Africa. And it has great weather. We're going through winter right now, by the way. The temperatures are around between, say, 12 and 19 degrees, which I know for you guys in Europe would be comfortable. For some of us, we're saying it's freezing. Some of us are saying it's freezing. This is really cold. But yeah, we offer, like I said, basic, intermediate, and advanced courses. There is a course, course structure that stretches out throughout the year, but we also have the option of providing tailor-made programs.
Yes.
So if you had a class, say, if AFFORD wanted to put together a class, we can work at trying to situate it at a time that's convenient for AFFORD, and have that mounted here. That's a possibility too. Yeah.
Paul, did you want to add something?
Yes, just wanted to pick up on a couple of points Ezra has raised. Firstly, just to say, I think colleagues of mine from university will have studied at your centre in Arusha and speak very highly of it. I had sort of friends at university who were studying Kiswahili, and as part of their study abroad, they went to Tanzania, both to Arusha and also, I think, Zanzibar. But yeah, they spoke very highly of their time there and of the teaching methods used. I cannot support enough to what Ezra was saying about an immersion approach. The best way to learn a language is to completely immerse yourself in it and the culture and the people. And as Ezra's just outlined, the best way of doing that is attending a structured course where you're also hosted by local people who preferably don't speak any English. So you have to learn to speak, in this case Kiswahili, but whatever language it is. And that's been my experience too. It's quite common for education systems in Europe to not allow enough time for this sort of immersion approach, and it's the most effective way of learning a language, especially, and my wife will tell you this from learning Spanish in Spain, where there is no English used in the instruction. It helps make learners a lot more confident, even at a very basic level, in expressing themselves and also in comprehending what's being spoken to them in the language they're learning. So I warmly support what your centre is doing, Ezra.
I too, like I was saying, I lived in Germany for 3 years, and you think that I would be fluent in German, but working for a English-speaking company, being surrounded by English all day and having 2 hours of German a week, it's not going to help. Even if you're living there, you use it, but when you're fully immersed, and especially in an environment where people are embracing as well, and they want you to learn and they will talk to you, that's going to help. And from what Ezra is saying, this is the environment you will have. So with that said, at AFFORD, we have a collaboration with Ezra and MS-TCDC in Arusha for those who are interested in learning Swahili and tapping into this great opportunity of learn the language that's going to be so key to business, to professional skills, just for personal growth, for a continent that is growing and connecting with the world in such an impressive way and such a great way. And I just think that this is a time to really learn and time to get connected with African languages. So as AFFORD, we've recognized this, and as Paul was saying, he's heard good things about it as well from colleagues that he's had in the past and college friends, his peers. So we have now an opportunity for those who are watching this webinar to go to Arusha, to go to the school in Tanzania, Arusha, Tanzania, and learn Swahili. If it's beginner's level, basic level, the more advanced, there's something for everybody. Nothing is going to make you unqualified. Okay, and if I could do that, I would as well. I think it's really exciting. And on top of that, I was even saying for those who want a bit of excitement, who want a bit of something else to add to their trip, there's also opportunities if you want to go see Mount Kilimanjaro and go and climb as far as
This is an
you
important point, Jacqueline. Arusha is a beautiful part of the country, and there's lots of amazing things to see and do while you're there. You've mentioned Mount Kilimanjaro. It's also well cited for all sorts of safari activities. And as Ezra said, it's a lovely part of the country. So there's a lot to kind of draw people there.
So what's to lose? Hey,
you can do touristic stuff.
It's a great opportunity. Seeing pictures of the place that you'll be learning at, everything. It's got mod cons. It's a lovely, beautiful place, and it just looks so peaceful there as well. So I'd like to invite those who are watching. I'll be sending out an email to those who are watching live, and where this video will be posted will be a link to where you can register. There's different times of the year, as I was saying, that you can come and learn, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, more tailored programs. We are working with Ezra's team, very, very capable, very, very impressive team on setting up this opportunity. So I want to say, grab it, people. It's a one-off, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. So guys who have joined in, have you got any questions that you'd like to ask Ezra before we release you all for the rest of your lunch break? Any questions for any of the attendees? You can type, I think you should be able to type in the box, or if you want to, I can bring you, I can unmute you. I think I can unmute you all. If you've got a question, then you can actually say something. If you'd like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, or you can type it, okay? So just give you a couple of minutes if you'd like to do it. Please get that question in if it's about general African languages, or if you're interested in learning more, then, or you've got a few questions to Ezra, please do ask. I think Paul has left us or been cut off. Oh, he's back. So if you do any questions, please do type that in the box right now. And like I said, I will be putting the link in an email to you guys who are here live, and to in where this box has been posted on our Facebook group, Diaspora Experience group, on our AFFORD Facebook page, AFFORD UK Facebook page, so that you can see that and grab the opportunity. We do have a new website as well for Diaspora Experience. You'll get the information for that as well. Really excited about all the trips and programs that we're launching. But this one, like I said, if you want to build business, if you want to connect, if you want to go and work in a country where it's speaking that language, or if you even want to just travel for a holiday or improve for your career, for your master's, your PhD, this is a place to go and get set. You will leave knowing something, because Ezra said. Somebody is asking, thanks for the talk, is there a preferred language to learn? I appreciate the content is large, but would anyone suggest a starter language? Ezra, is your title set? This is LD, I'm not sure your actual name, but LD is asking, is there a preferred language to learn? A starter language for Africa?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'd like to again vouch for Swahili because of how widely it is, how quickly it is spreading and widely spoken. There are other languages that one can learn. I know that if we get deep into this, you'll find that some West African languages like Yoruba are fairly extensively spoken, but that's, I guess, the dominance of Yoruba in Nigeria is also because of how many Yorubas there are in Nigeria. Swahili, on the other hand, is seen as a country that, as a language that cuts across many countries. Like I say, the whole swath of the Eastern and Southern Africa have adopted Swahili, and Swahili is becoming a language that is used both in business and for pleasure. So I would certainly encourage them to think about Swahili.
I would too. I actually want to learn. Tuti is saying, any recommendations for immersive Bantu language apps? Do you know any of these apps? Paul, you are nodding.
I don't know of any apps specific to Bantu languages, no, but I think it's an excellent idea, and I'm wondering if Ezra might have some ideas in that regard.
Apps. Actually, that's something we're exploring as well, but it's not anything that I can say is on the market yet. But it's something we're looking at. I'm trying to see how to popularize. We're thinking that as the demand for Swahili increases, then it'll be necessary to think about putting it online too. So that's something that we're exploring. Yeah.
In terms of other African languages, sorry, Jacqueline.
That's okay.
I was just going to say, in terms of other African languages, there are increasing number of apps are available, certainly in terms of Arabic, but also in terms of Amharic. And indeed, there's a young Ethiopian German we know in our network called Asquith, who's got a software company based in Addis, who's actually launched a range of apps aimed at people learning Amharic, in particular children, both in terms of Ethiopian children looking to be literate in Amharic, but also in terms of foreigners. So yeah, but I'm sure there are loads more coming up for Swahili.
Yeah.
Tuti Thomas is saying, I'd like to IP that idea. Go. They want to register, I guess. Go for it. Go for it. I mean, it's only going to grow. I mean, just as we're debating about the percentage of the world who will be African or living in Africa or from Africa by 2050, with that quantity, with that figure that we are hearing about, these kind of tech ideas or business ideas are going to be so important. So most definitely, and do get in touch with AFFORD if you'd like to get some support with our business club ABC. We may be able to get you connected for that. But then even with that, it'd be great if you went to Arusha to increase your own Swahili.
Come and learn the language, yes.
Own experience of that you can then bring to your story when you're creating that. And that's on a serious level, because then if you can bring something extra to say, you studied some Swahili, you had an experience, and that's what's encouraged you to definitely bring out this concept in this app. You may even be able to work with people like Ezra and have some kind of business thing going forward. Who knows? Who knows? But it'd be good to step out and learn. Sorry, Ezra, you were going to say something.
Absolutely. No. You said it all. You said it all. Yeah.
LD is saying, would the experience be possible for a group of friends looking to reconnect with their heritage, not just for business? Oh, yeah, Ezra, please.
Well, yeah, like I said, I mean, you know, I always tell this funny story about how I ended up in a meeting in Mozambique one time, and we had French translation, and so the Francophonies were sitting on one side of the room and the Anglophones on the other, and we were all talking back and forth, and we had, you know, I think it was 2 French translators. And then in the middle of the conversation, as we would, in the middle of a conversation, I got a phone call from one of my relatives, and I talked to them in Swahili. And the 2 Congolese across on the other side heard me speaking Swahili. So one of them came to me and said, because we had actually planned to have a meeting, and we had asked one of the translators one of the interpreters, if they would sit with us. And so this guy comes running around to me and he says, you speak Swahili? I said, yeah. He says, then we don't need an interpreter. And so from then on, we just spoke Swahili. That for me, you know, so when you talk about the heritage and, you know, there's a nostalgia that comes with being able to communicate directly with somebody in a language that you're both familiar with. So yeah, and okay, like I said, there's, you know, there's contestation about whether Swahili is a Bantu language, purely Bantu, or, you know, whether it is an amalgamation of, you know, other sources. But there is that element of heritage as well. There's a lot of nostalgia that I think strikes people as they get into learning Swahili. So there's many reasons. I have to say that my daughters, I have 3 daughters, and they didn't learn their mother tongue when they were younger for reasons of school and all. And I did bring my daughter here to our school, and she picked up her Swahili, and she was telling me that for her, the greatest benefit was because she was able now to communicate with those who thought she was showing off by not being able to speak Swahili, and now is able to communicate with them quite effectively. In fact, she surprises them with her language. So yeah, there's plenty of reasons to learn Swahili.
I would strongly agree with that, Ezra, especially in terms of the point you made about the cultural history of Kiswahili. It's so rich, and in particular, the Swahili that's spoken in Tanzania is supposed to be the most beautiful, I'm told. But yes, it's you know, a legacy of its history as a coastal trading language. It's been influenced by Arabic, by Persian, by Portuguese, by English, amongst others. Yes, it's as much about the culture, the poetry, the music, as it is about, say, just doing business. And I'd also draw attention to its relevance and interest for people who might be, you know, 2nd or 3rd generation diaspora, but from a Swahili-speaking background. You might have grown up with your parents speaking Swahili at home. It's not uncommon within diaspora communities, and I'm thinking of examples within my own family, where the children grew up speaking, they grew up understanding their parents' kind of mother tongue, but they will often refuse to answer except in English. Until they get a bit older, and then they may find themselves a bit embarrassed when they try and speak in their parents' tongue because they've got an English accent, for example.
Yes, exactly.
I can think of cousins who, well, you know, got a bit of ribbing, shall we say, because they, when they spoke Arabic with quite a thick English accent. So it's always good to, you know, develop and deepen your knowledge of any language, but also, particularly if you're 2nd generation and you have some in your brain already, it's really pleasing to have through an immersion course the ability to activate that.
The refresher course, yeah.
Yes.
That's, you know, I feel like I have been reprimanded right there, and an English born. I feel that I need to go and just learn a language aside from English. It's like even more important to learn African language, being in African business and African development, and someone who loves to travel to the continent quite repetitive, quite a lot. They can just about speak English sometimes, guys. Yeah. See, if you're interested, please do check out the email sent to those who are here live, and for those who are watching this on Facebook or one of our other channels, YouTube, etc. Please do see the link that's attached to this video for where you can register. Ezra is amazing, guys. You can see he's not just a teacher of the language, but he's very knowledgeable about language, about the continent, and a great educator. So I think you would do well to be under his education. And just being beautiful Tanzania. I mean, I've loved the country. I've been to Arusha myself before as well, and Zanzibar, and it's a beautiful place. So you can always add on to your trip and go do some beach as well as do the mountain, as well as learn Swahili and everything. So it's a great opportunity. So with that said, I'd like to thank those who have attended today. You guys have made it what it is by being here. Thank you for your very, very good questions. Tuti, go ahead and rock that idea and make it happen. Get in touch with us here at AFFORD if you want some support from the business club. Paul, you're amazing. Thank you for the education about the different languages, about your experience. He learned French in Africa. Come on now. I mean, that's amazing. Look at that. And he's fluent. And that adds on to the other languages that he has, like Arabic. Ezra, it's all about what you've been doing, and I thank you for your time. Richard has left, so we give him thanks as well. But Ezra, thank you for the presentation, and we do hope to be doing more with you and to be able to send more people to you so that the world could be speaking Kiswahili come 2050. Great. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Have a wonderful day.
The future is African. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely, great, thanks. Yeah, okay.
Bye. Bye. Bye-bye.